Dr. Haley Perlus, welcome to the Way of Champions. It's an honor to have you on.
Thanks, John. I am happy to be here.
Well, we were just catching up before we got started here about our Vail, Colorado connection, and you said some of your time there. You go to the desert and you go to the mountains, and so it's a very small world, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I think we know some same people and I think our time collided. I'm still there, you're not, but it's pretty cool. Today I'm mountain biking, tomorrow I'll be skiing. So,
Yeah,
not a bad life.
it's a good part of the world for sure. Awesome. Well, before we dive in here, can you just tell people a little bit more about yourself? What I found really interesting about your bio is just this intersection of performance psychology, but also with certifications in coaching and nutrition and fitness, like much more whole athlete aspect and not just maybe the mind.
Yeah. I mean, I do stay in my lane. So
Yeah.
I do now focus on the neck up, but I was an athlete. I then was a coach. I was a personal trainer, group fitness instructor, did certifications in nutrition. And I think it's really valuable because as you know, this is a holistic, this is an holistic performance. And I need to understand, I want to understand what the athletes that I'm working with, what they're doing from a nutritional and a physical and all the levels of performance so that I can best coordinate and complement their training with mental
Mhm.
toughness.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what are the things that you're seeing out there in this world? I mean, you're working with some individual athletes, but also high performers in the business world as well. So, what are their commonalities? I mean, I always think sports is just a, you know, microcosm of what's going on in society. So, if it's happening in sports, it's happening everywhere else.
Yeah. I do think there's actually one big difference because I agree with you.
Mhm.
There's so much is the same, but there's one big difference between, sports and business and life, I guess, is in sports, we train so much more than we
Mhm.
compete.
Mm.
Depending on the sport, we
We'd
may be
like to hope.
training we like to have, right? But sometimes there are sports that where we're training 90% of the time and then competing 10%. In business and life, we have to take advantage of the training opportunities because there aren't many and we're always performing. Someone's always watching, we're always competing. So that's the one difference. But other than that, being able to harness the stress as a performance enhancer, which is really what I like to focus on,
Mhm.
embracing the pressure, exposing yourself to the stress, and obviously performing when it matters most.
Mhm.
Uh, that's applicable to everything we're doing in life.
Yeah, for sure. So talk about that because obviously stress is such a big thing. And in the sports realm, right, most of our listeners here are coaches, they're parents with kids in sport. And maybe start this, right? I see too many people trying to shield kids from the stress, right? Or the uncertainty, but you can't. I mean, sports, anything that you care about is going to bring a little anxiety, a little stress, uh, uncertainty because you're being asked to perform. How do you approach that with a parent or maybe first with the athlete and then with the people who support them?
Yeah, I welcome it. You just said anything we're going to feel nervous about is something we care about.
Hmm.
So I welcome it. In fact, I say to many athletes in my sessions with me, if they come to me, help me not be afraid, help me not feel anxious. If you weren't feeling those things, then I'd be concerned. Because
Hmm.
then why are you doing this? Why are you investing so much of your resources and, time, money, sacrifice for something you don't care about? So that's the first thing. Welcome it and accept it. But there's a difference between, I think, accepting it like it's part of the game or
Hmm.
accepting it with like courage. Here
Yeah.
we go. No matter your position, I'm going to be on offensive play and I'm
Hmm.
going to walk in to this stress. I'm going to own this pressure.
Hmm.
And, I believe we earn the right to feel pressure because it means we're doing something right. Therefore, we have expectations, which means
Hmm.
we also have confidence.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had a guy on the show years ago, Jonah Oliver, and he talked about it. He said, you know, when you buy an airline ticket and you flip it over and it has all the terms and conditions, like these are the terms and conditions. When you sign up to do any achievement activity, you're going to feel these things. You're going to feel that. And guess what? The people on television, they feel them as well. It's just like you said, they have developed the capacity, right, to work through them and take positive action in those moments versus being overcome by them and quit or walk away or just crumble under the pressure. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really about what it is developing capacity to accept what's happening and just be like, ah, what a privilege it is to be here and feel this way.
Right. And isn't that really separates the athlete from the competitor
Mm.
in my humble opinion.
Okay, go ahead
Like
on that. I like that.
yeah, well, like I just said, in sports we're training much more than we compete. Well, training is I was an athlete, I was a coach. So I know when coaches tell their athletes just treat it like, treat competition like a practice session. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
same. It's just not. So when we're training all the time, we're developing the skill set of training. We also need to develop the skill set of competing, and they're different. In training, we're working on our tactics, our strategy, our techniques, figuring out equipment, trial and erroring. It's more of a calm environment. In competition, in the way I look at it is in competition to be a true competitor, it's mental. The name of the game is to get your head straight, your
Mm-hmm.
emotions under control, so that you can let your body do what you've been training it to do.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not the same thing. So we have to learn how to transition from being an athlete to a competitor and then harness that competitive instinct, that competitive nature. And the best of the best don't just perform as they practice, they perform better than they practice because they use that energy to
Mm-hmm.
help them be more efficient.
Do you think everyone, like I get asked a lot, like, oh, my kid's not competitive. Do you think everyone can become more competitive? You think that's something intrinsic that we bring out? Do you think it's something that can be developed wholly or to an extent? I mean, I don't know that anyone has the perfect answer for this. I'm just curious in your experience, because I'm sure you have clients that come that says, yeah, just my kid just won't compete.
I believe, well, if you there's a lot that could be going on in that
Mm.
environment, right?
And I think
But
that's really important thing is like, it's not just a lot of times it's not just a sports thing, right? There's a
no.
lot of other things going on. So feel
Yeah,
free to talk
yeah.
about all of that because I think it's really important.
Well, I'll first say this and then I'll dive into that example that you just gave of a parent telling you that their kid's not competitive. To answer your first question, do I think we can all learn a little bit more of the skill set of competitiveness? I do. I think we all have the ability to learn. Do we all want to learn? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And you may learn the skill, but it still may not be good enough
Mm-hmm.
for, professional level if you want to go all the way. Uh, I believe the competitiveness is a skill, and I think we all can be better compared to we can be better tomorrow than we are today. But we'll all improve that skill at our personal level,
Mm-hmm.
personal, I guess, process and
Yeah. I
speed.
mean, there's so many things that go into being truly elite performer, not the word elite like we throw around haphazardly, but like truly elite. And I mean, starts with, were you given good genes? Like, sorry, that's your ceiling, right? And then all those things. But I like this idea that, competitiveness is a skill. It can be developed if you work on it, we shouldn't be sort of fixed around it, like, oh, I'm just not competitive or whatever. Does
I,
that is it something that comes and goes? I mean, I'll just share my own personal story of being someone who was super competitive as an athlete and now, at 53, it's just not there. Like I don't care if someone whoops me on a mountain bike ride. I just want to enjoy the ride, right? I'm not looking at my time going, oh man, gotta ride that 1 minute faster than I did yesterday. So if I feel like it's something that comes and goes and ebbs and flows based on what your goals are as well. And if my goal is enjoyment, then I don't really care how fast I ride.
Right. It's your purpose, right? So
Yeah.
if it really depends on what your intention is in that moment. And if you're looking at enjoyment, you're looking at enjoyment. I too, myself, I think I'm more competitive with myself
Mm,
than I am compared to other people at this stage of my life.
mm,
However, you just made me think, and I just because of my background, I was a ski racer.
mm.
So I don't know if I was in a dual slalom right now, I think I'd be pretty competitive against the person I'm competing with.
Yeah.
But on the day to day, I'm just out for a good time too, or I want to beat my own time, I want to beat my own
Yeah.
score.
Yeah. And that's interesting, right? And it means it can come and go, right? Like you do this. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I think I agree with you, right? So I started like skate skiing 3 years ago, right? And there's this little sort of snow park by us, and it starts out with quarter-mile flat, and then this giant hill, and they call it Crybaby Hill because it's just a miserable hill. And I'm always like, okay, I got to make it to the top of that without stopping. Okay, got to make it to the next section without stopping. So it's like that self-competitiveness. But if someone's skiing with me, I don't care that they're ahead of me. And certainly in skate skiing, I also don't care that the 70-year-old just blew past me who's been doing it for 40 years because their technique's way better than my flailing out there.
Well, and that brings me to a really good point, which you just said. You also have to be realistic about your expectations. What's the
Mhm.
saying? Don't get upset at the results you don't get because of the work you didn't do.
Yeah.
If you don't have the training,
Yeah.
how can you possibly compare yourself to the 70-year-old? But I do think it varies from situation, from again, like you said, your intentions, your goal of this particular activity. But can we learn competitiveness? We can. Do we
Hmm.
need to learn it when you're in a competitive sport? We do. So when
Hmm.
people come to me in my practice because they can't perform like they practice,
Hmm.
that's someone who needs to learn how to be a competitor.
So what are some of those tools? And maybe before we get into the tools, like how do we do you start by stripping away and trying to get at the essence of, well, why on competition day do you freeze, or why do you feel like you can't do that?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it could be, various mental blocks. Certainly, I've had athletes with the mental block of intimidation. So on day, when it's time to compete, when they're in a tournament, they're focused on what other people are going to do instead of their own process.
Hmm.
Another mental block is just they don't know how to deal with this unpleasantness that's going through their bodies, the sweaty palms, the muscle tension, the butterflies in their stomach. So they don't know how to harness that physiological arousal. That could
Hmm.
be one. Expectations, they're so focused on the outcome, therefore they can't compete. So there's
Hmm.
various reasons why we may not be competing as well as we train,
Hmm.
but they're different. So we do have to understand the specific athlete's mental block. But at the very beginning, before we even do that, there is one thing that's the same. Every athlete has to accept the fact that they're in a competition, and that
Hmm.
competition has high pressure and arousal and people watching and scoreboard and consequences. We have to accept that. We have to not just accept that. We have to want it, you know?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
we go through that process first, getting excited about competition.
Yeah, like we have to embrace it. And that idea of I'm excited versus, I think there's some research in that, right? Like if I'm saying to myself I'm excited versus I'm scared or I'm nervous or whatever. And I think also the feeling that, oh, there's something wrong with me for feeling sweaty
Hmm.
palms and butterflies and whatever. And we can be better at, like, no, that again, that just means that you care, right? It just means that you care.
Well, yeah, welcome to the club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations, you've made it.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Yeah.
congratulations, you made it. At this time of this recording, a couple of weeks ago, Rory McIlroy just won the Players Championships, and he gave what I think is one of the best post interviews because it was all about mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, because I he won in a playoff, so he had to go and play on Monday, and
Hmm.
he admits to it being a very stressful day, and he admits to feeling more nervous than he has in a long time.
Hmm.
This is the best of the best athletes. They feel
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
And then it's they, even though it's unpleasant, so the tension that we're experiencing, the energy that we're experiencing initially may be perceived as unpleasant, but we
Hmm.
have to change our mindset, tell the story of, wait, this is what we need to have, this is what needs to happen,
Hmm.
because this arousal is energy. And now
Hmm.
I get to decide whether I'm going to use this energy for good.
Hmm. Yeah. And what's interesting is all these top athletes talk about this, right? That it's really on that day. It's not, you know, Rory McIlroy clearly has the golf skills or whatever. It's about the mental thing, and especially in a sport like golf or your sport of ski racing, where you're going to lose most of the time, right? Even if you're the best in the world. I heard Jack Nicklaus, he told the story. He's like, I was the best ever and I lost 90% of the times I played. So you better get used to losing, right? And I know in ski racing and the work that I've done, one of the most challenging ages is that jump to like 16 where you go for your fist points internationally and not just in your little local thing, and people who have always won. And one of the things that the coaches said, and maybe this was your experience as well, I'd be curious to hear, you know, a kid who's underage and races up and finishes 40th is so excited that they finished 40th because, oh, well, I was young. And then 1 year later, they finished 12th and it's a disaster, and it's because, oh, well, I'm supposed to be the best anymore. It's like, no, like you were so happy finishing 40th. Why are you miserable finishing 12th? So was that your experience at all?
Those expectations can get to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I actually started racing when I was 5 years old. I had to lie about my age because you weren't supposed to race until you're seven, but they needed more girls on the team.
Uh-huh.
And I had talent. And so I started racing and, was winning every event. Peaked when I was 12, was the world championship for my age group. And
Hmm.
then you're right. Then you move into FIS, which is, that U16 eventually. And talent only takes you so far. John Wooden said this the best. Nobody could do it without talent,
Hmm.
but not everyone can do it with talent.
Hmm.
And so I had the talent, which was great, but then people started creeping up because they started putting forth the work and developing the skills on their own. And so then the competition got a little bit more fierce. And
Hmm.
I had to figure that out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all that easy.
Hmm.
Definitely heartbreak at times because I wasn't winning all the time. There was some losing. But today, you mentioned losing, and I thank you for mentioning losing because losing is part of the game. You know,
Hmm.
f- I do believe that we learn from it,
Hmm.
you know, but I actually believe that there is such thing as failure. I believe that there is such thing as losing. And if we don't, I believe there's so much energy trying to convince ourselves that losing is just learning. If we just allow ourselves to acknowledge the fact and accept the fact that losing is an option, failure is an option, then I don't have to give it a whole lot of energy. And then I
Hmm.
can focus on how to increase my probability of being the best that I can be. And
Hmm.
when I lose, when I fail, I'll be upset, and then I'll be able to rebound better because I haven't been trying to stay away from it, nor
Hmm.
have I attached so much focus and energy on it. It's just something that's part of sport and
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. And like you said, it's these expectations, these outside opinions, or, I imagine, like, to go back to Roy McIlroy, it's like the pressure is, what are people going to say about me if I blow this? Right? That's the golfer pressure when you're Rory McIlroy, when you have a great golfer who's never won a major, or, oh, once again, they blew it on the, final day. And I think that's the voice that you have to stop listening to, and you have to start speaking and you have to start taking positive action instead of listening to the voice that says, oh my God, what are they going to say about you?
And then the trick of the trade is to do exactly what you just said, is change your voice. And what do you switch it to? What do you focus on? That's going to be more. We all talk about positive self-talk. I like the word productive
Mm.
self-talk
Hmm.
because not everything is, sunshines and rainbows. Sometimes things just simply suck. But how can I be more productive in my thinking?
Right. Like I'm not, and there's people who may disagree, but I'm not someone who thinks that you should be lying. You can't lie to yourself, right? You can't lie to say, "Oh, I'm in the best shape of my life," when I'm not in the best shape of my life, right? And so being positive about that is not helpful. So I like this. I like the nuance of productive. I want to ask one more ski racing question because it's timely, and I'm sure you saw this just in the World Cup finals with Lindsey Vonn last week or whatever it was, right? Coming in, finishing
Second place.
second place. And there's this video of her just emotional breakdown in the finish line. Have you seen that at all or
I didn't see that particular video, but I did watch an interview about her competing this year and what her intentions are for next year and what this all means. So I am versed in it. I just don't know that I recall that specific video you
it was
saw.
just, she crossed the line, looks at her time, arms
Oh,
up.
yeah.
Yeah. And then she just kind of hits the ground and just starts weeping. Right. And that's all the emotion, all the pressure, all the stress, all the self-doubt, all the can I really do this? Do I belong here? Pouring out in that moment. It was a beautiful moment of sports, right? Of like that's it. And you never what I love about sport is you can never feel that euphoria without feeling all the disappointment and all the losses and all the failure. And so many people want to avoid all the bad stuff and just feel that, and it's impossible.
No. You got to take the risk. You got to own that, heartbreak is going to happen, and that makes the celebrations all the more special.
Hmm.
But it just makes it such a cool, human, amazing experience. All of
Hmm.
it. We're
Yeah.
lucky if we get to win and lose and experience it all.
Yeah. Yeah. What about we've talked a lot about stress, but what does the word fear mean to you? Because obviously fear is a big part of it as well. And fear from hurtling down a ski race course at 80 miles an hour is maybe different than fear of missing a putt on a golf course because you're probably not going to die in that moment if you screw up. But like, what is fear, and how do you talk about fear?
Yeah. You're right. There is a certain level, we have to have certain distinctions. Is it fear of losing or is it fear of dying, right? Which
Yeah.
can definitely happen in sport. So fear is one of the, if I like to simplify things, fear is one of the four main components of anxiety. So
Okay.
fear, frustration, worry, and anger. To me, those are the main emotions, that would create anxiety. And with anxiety comes self-doubt.
Hmm.
So to me, how do I work through fear? First things first, as you have already mentioned this entire conversation, it's part of sport, it's part of life. So accept it. Like you're human. Let's not add more frustration or anger upon yourself when you're afraid. It's okay, you're human.
Hmm.
I get it. But you do also have to accept certain risks. And that's the next question. So, Lindsey Vonn, we'll just take Lindsey Vonn because you mentioned it. She talks about the fact that she's not afraid.
Right.
When she's standing in that starting gate, about to ski, what, 80, 100 miles per,
Hmm. Yeah.
and risking her life. If she's standing in that starting gate, afraid that she's going to crash, she best stop and get out of that starting gate because
Hmm.
she cannot go. So
Hmm.
she has to be able to work through that or at least, press mute. And those are things that we do. So in the training aspect of it, depending on the fear and depending on the person and the situation, sometimes we work through the fears and turn the fears into a challenge.
Hmm.
And I love this little quote: fear makes you retreat, challenge makes you defeat.
Hmm.
So, like, dare me, challenge me, like,
Hmm.
and that's usually more about fear of loss, fear of failure. But when it comes fear of risking limb,
Hmm.
life and limb, there's an acceptance piece there. And
Yeah.
so I get it. Um, I can share a story. Actually, I was working with outside of ski racing. I was working with a motocross athlete,
Hmm.
and he'd go off a quarter ramp and then do tricks in the air. And he was 19 when we started working together, and he'd only been dirt biking for 3 years. But in those
Hmm.
3 years, he had broken 27 bones.
Ooh. Yeah.
And his last break, doing a backflip, he broke his shin bone, his tibia. And his doctor said that it had been 6 weeks so he can walk again. To him, that meant he could ride again, but he mentally couldn't get himself on the bike.
Yeah.
He was afraid,
Yeah.
afraid of the 28th break.
Yeah.
And so he came to me, and the last thing I'm going to do is say, don't worry about it. There's nothing to be afraid of because he's
Right.
already broken 27 bones.
Right.
It is a real possibility that a 28th will come.
Hmm.
So I asked him to talk about the fear. Let's talk about it. And first, as you know, talking about it shrinks it already because you're not just holding it all in. You're allowed to express it and work through the emotions. And then also the second question was, is it worth the risk? Are you willing all the things that you wanted? And he wanted to qualify for X Games and be the
Hmm.
youngest athlete to qualify for X Games in quarter pipe. And he wanted it more than he was afraid of injury. But he had to make that choice. I
Mm.
want it more than I'm afraid of this.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
only then can you then command your mind to focus in on strategy. Only
Mm.
then can you accept the fear, but really direct your emotions more towards that excitement that we were talking about.
Yeah. Because a sport like that, right? Just call it an X Games sport or a downhill ski racer, or I mean, I heard just a big mountain skier talk about who was, filming, said, if I'm not afraid, it's not making the movie. Right? Like, and that's it, right? If Lindsey Vaughn is skiing in control, she's not winning the race, right? And if that guy's not, so it's I love that idea of like, can I accept it, and is my purpose of doing this greater than the fear? Then I'll keep going, and then again, athletes get to a point where then it's not, and that's
Right,
when it's time to walk away because you
right,
won't commit to the trick, or you won't, and you'll get hurt.
right. But when you do make that decision to want, and then you are standing in the starting gate, or you're about to perform because you know you want it and you've made that choice, the fear, you then train yourself, skill of attentional control. The fear kind of goes on mute.
Mm,
You shelf it, you
yeah.
pause it, and then in that moment you are present on the want.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. What, so I'm just trying to think of where to go from here, but if you would classify then the high performers that you've worked with, what are some of the qualities we probably talk about? We've talked about some of them already, but what are the qualities of true high performers in sport and in other things, besides this ability to maybe quiet the chatter or endure it? What are some of the other things?
Showing up when you don't want to,
Mm,
not trying to convince yourself that you're supposed to love every aspect of your sport.
hmm.
Understanding that generally speaking, you love your sport, but showing up when you don't want to, because there are going to be days, there's going to be times, there's going to be weather, there's going to be, so so you acknowledge it, and again, you don't give that any attention. You show up.
Hmm.
Again, it kind of goes with the embracing the stress, the embracing the pressure. You're ready. You're ready to endure discomfort, pain, sacrifice. Like again,
Hmm.
that's an ownership of it. And when you do show up, even though you only may have 70% to give that day, you
Hmm.
give 100% of that 70. So you always know that you put it all out there, even though it's not going to be perfect. And I think the best competitors are the ones that take on a competitive advantage wherever they can. And I'll
Hmm.
share an example. I'm working with a collegiate diver right now. We've
Hmm.
been just started, we've about a month in, and she was talking about the 3 meter platform and how everybody, no one likes a 3 meter platform. So I taught her the skill of let everyone else talk about it.
Yeah.
And you stay, you befriend it almost, even though you don't
Hmm.
like it either. Maybe you won't be, maybe you can go as far as befriending it, or again, just an acceptance. But I think the highest performers is gonna let everyone else talk and complain and find unity in that, and you are going to gain a competitive advantage and let them all get distracted, and you're staying in your game because
Mm.
somebody's going to win today. It might as well be you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's such an important aspect of how you approach things as well, right? Of like, I love this thing. Why do you guys all hate? This is my favorite, Then you're getting in their heads as well.
Right,
Then
right.
you're like messing with them. There was this really interesting research done. It was actually, I think, on pro mountain bike racers about self-talk and about um just changing their talk when they came to a hard climb or something like that. And changing it. And one guy's like, I can't, I just hate climbing. I can't do it. Um, and then about 8 months later, he reached out to the researchers. He's like, I figured it out. And like, well, what'd you do? He goes, I haven't changed what I say. I just say it out loud to everyone around me. Like, this hill sucks. You're all suffering or whatever. And he's like, and that gets me over the top because now I'm in their heads. So,
It's definitely a tactic too.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean the onus there is just kind of releasing that energy. I mean that's what that's doing, right? It's
yeah,
it's not letting it consume you.
yeah.
It's releasing that energy, and that is a strategy to release the energy.
Something, right? Whatever works for you. I like this idea that you talk about as well, is just giving your best on your bad days, right? And probably a third of your days are going to be great, and a third are going to be lousy, and a third are going to be eh. And if you can approach your bad days of like, let me get the most out of this, and by having a bad day, I just got that one out of the way, which gets me closer to a good day, as well. And so I think that's the difference. I certainly talk about the team with the teams that I work with of like really the difference of winning a championship is, can we be better on our off days, right, than other people? Because everyone has them. Can you as an athlete be better on your off day? Can you as a teammate, when you see a teammate having an off day, be like, come on, I know it's not your day. I know you're in the middle of finals. I know you broke up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, but come on, like, just give a little more today. Be here with us now. That sort of collective is really one of the most important things of the more I can get out of those bad days, then the farther along I am to have really good days.
100%. And you now there is something to say from a technical standpoint to like what beat a dead horse. Like if you're not, there is sometimes where it's just like, let's just stop. We're actually going backwards here. We're making more errors, unforced, we're prone to
Mhm.
injury. So we do have, as a coach, you have to be aware, and as an athlete, you have to know when it might be time to stop because you're just going backwards at this point.
Yeah.
However, from the mental perspective, you are in those moments training your mental toughness. You're training your perseverance. You're training your resilience. And in addition to that, it's the follow through of a principle that I hold very dear that I teach everyone I work with. Give yourself some grace.
Hmm.
Never let yourself off the hook.
Mm.
And you know when you let yourself off the hook. You know when you let up, when you could have gone a little bit more. It doesn't matter if it wasn't perfect from an effort standpoint, because that right there, giving yourself some grace, but never letting yourself off the hook, is the commitment to excellence.
I love that idea because that's it, right? It's like I'm okay. I'm not a bad person for having a bad day, but I got to make it up. I heard I just spaced his name, sadly, who's a very, very famous rugby player, New Zealand All Blacks player. And he talked about he would do their free kicks and stuff like that. And he said the way, he had this journal of practicing and whatever, and he would record all his results. He was very meticulous about all that. But he talked about that every day at practice, he would practice 10 kicks, never nine, never 11, right? And so if he made 10 out of 10, great, right? He didn't keep going. If he went 2 out of 10, he was still done at 10. And he said, because I always knew I'm taking 10 more tomorrow. So on my bad days, it's okay. I'll be back tomorrow, figure it out. And I think so there's almost this, I don't know what you like, toxic grit of like, keep going, make it worse, make it worse, make it worse to the point that you've just totally defeated yourself, you're physically exhausted. You might even injure yourself trying to fix something that might just not be fixable on Tuesday, but on Wednesday you could fix it.
I mean, so much learning there, right? You're
Yeah.
learning how to, you're learning how to appreciate the good days, stick around, fight through it on the bad days. And then you're
Hmm.
just learning consistency and not letting your emotions lead because you made a logical decision, 10 kicks.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to change my mind based on how I emotionally feel about how I'm kicking today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super powerful, I think. It's just a consistent thing, right? Like I got to go to the weight room and some days feels great and some days it doesn't, but I do the same sets that planned on doing no matter how they feel. So, yeah, well, I like this because I think it's all, what about recovery in this? My experience with so many youth athletes, and I'll just say mostly in North America, is they never recover, right? So that we have this myth of the grind, and if I'm not out there doing it, someone's doing it. But what we know at the highest level of sport is recovery is just as important as, pushing it to the max. And so I meet all these kids who they can never go 100% because they never go 20. So every day is 70, and we know that's not optimal for getting better. So I'm sure you get people like that as well who are afraid that I can't take a day off. Someone else is passing me instead of saying, no, that actually will help you pass them by being better the next day.
Yeah, we have to change our story about recovery because we do. There's like guilt,
Guilt,
there
shame.
is
Yeah.
there's guilt, there's shame, there's that competitiveness. So uh, let's just learn from professional athletes, like you said. Professional athletes don't recover. Well, they do recover, and they recover because it's a mandatory component of their performance program.
Hmm.
And so we need to understand, no matter what age you are, is that recovery is part of the performance program,
Hmm.
mandatory component. Why? Well,
Just
we
like eating
can,
food is, just like taking an ice bath is.
right,
Yeah.
right, right. And, we can teach, you do this. This is not when I'm growing. This is not
Hmm.
when I'm getting stronger. When you
Hmm.
drop the weight, that's when you grow, that's when you get stronger. And a little, I think we can do it with our youth athletes. Coaches can do keep a journal, like we can actually measure our performance. Before you have recovery, then you take some recovery, then you come back and just see, like, let's prove the concept because
Hmm.
it is a real concept. So let's prove it. Let's show these kids some tangible feedback
Hmm.
that they can then buy into it. But there's recovery also in two different ways. And also we've been talking about physical recovery, but there's also mental and emotional recovery,
Yeah, talk
which
about that.
is,
That's
which
important.
is essential. So mental recovery, something that we've robbed our kids, you start talking about youth, something that we've robbed our kids now of is the brilliance of boredom.
Hmm.
So when you and
Amen
I
to
were
that.
young, when you and I were young and we're taking a car ride, road trip with our parents, we didn't have iPads, screens. What did we do? We stared out the window, bored, and we became
Mindfulness.
brilliant.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness, what a concept. But in those moments, we became brilliant. Things that we've been learning in school and sport, all those ideas on their own get to be processed. And we take two ideas, we put them together, and we create something new. Things connect, dots start connecting. And we've robbed ourselves, robbed our children of this. So
Mm-hmm.
just taking the time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to just be still, which is one aspect of recovery,
Hmm.
really renews energy mentally, emotionally, and physically. But even more so, an idea, concept that we weren't quite getting may suddenly click. It's that whole concept, don't tell me your idea, don't tell me your answer, go and sleep on it. You sleep on it, suddenly things make sense.
Hmm.
Same thing with this recovery piece. The other thing that we can do to prevent burnout, which is one of the reasons we do this. Just last week, I had an athlete who was telling me it's the end of the season for them, and he said, "I think I'm approaching burnout."
Mm.
And so I talked to him about active recovery. taking yourself out of one task. For him, it was his current competitive sport,
Hmm.
putting himself into another task,
Hmm.
as long as that other task creates calm and peace while you're doing it.
Right.
Playing guitar, listening to music, reading a book, it could be anything, but you want to experience calm and peace while doing it because that's
Hmm.
also a renewed sense of energy. So if
Hmm.
you're someone who gets stressed and freaked out when you're not doing anything, that stillness, even though I think is important and everyone needs to be taught that, that is just one area of recovery. The other is to engage in another activity that's peaceful and calming and prevents burnout. In fact, it's the only way to prevent and retreat burnout.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the author Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus, and they have a thing called the growth equation. But Brad had this, he wrote a book called Master of Change, and he told a really interesting story about, it was the Olympic champion speed skater, how he was really struggling with performance until he decided, you know what, Monday through Friday, I'm going to be an Olympic athlete. And then Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to hang out with my friends. I'm going to play guitar. And the analogy he used, which I really liked, is like you need a house with multiple rooms, and you can spend a lot of time in one room. That's my elite performance room. But the other rooms, they can't be locked, right? Because if I get injured, if I get cut, if I something happens, if I have a setback and I don't have that guitar room to go into or the drawing or photography or whatever it is, that's when burnout happens. That's when all sorts of psychological identity issues happen. And so it's just important. And it doesn't mean that you can't spend a lot of time in the high performance room, but you got to open the door and go in those other ones once. They have to be accessible to you, um, just to keep you, like you said, healthy.
I love it. No, that's
Yeah,
a great. I love that analogy. And if I can just add,
please.
you want to use those rooms not only when you feel you need them, you actually want to use those rooms proactively so that you never need them.
Yeah.
It's like drinking water, right? If we're not drinking water throughout the day, there'll come a moment where we're dehydrated. Now, we're past the point of no return. We're not going to be in our optimal performance. Now, do we still go and drink water? Of course,
Hmm.
but it's not optimal. We want to drink throughout the day so that we never get dehydrated and need the water.
Yeah.
Same thing with recovery. We want to use those other rooms proactively so that we never are in need of those
Hmm.
rooms, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, it does. And I think creating habits or systems to force you to go there once in a while is not bad. You're saying that, and I'm thinking about, I have a 17-year-old son who does a lot of stuff, but he just started like falling in love again playing the guitar. And so we have this room at the bottom of our stairs, and he leaves the guitar laying in the middle of the floor, and it drives me crazy, except he sees it and he goes, "Oh yeah, I need to play guitar for 10 minutes." And he just plays for a little bit and then he comes up and takes a shower and goes to bed. But he like that little visual cue reminds him this is how. And then, as the dad, I'm like, "Oh, but you have so much to do and you should be doing this and that." But I also know how important that is, of like that's the sort of the reset button at the end of a long day. And so yeah, so he's created that little system that I trip over once in a while, but I guess it's okay.
Keep tripping
Keep tripping.
because I think it's working for him. But you're right, it's those attentional cues. We're creatures of habit. We can't just because we come up with an idea does not mean that that idea is going to stick. We have to
Right.
force ourselves. We have to push ourselves to live that new behavior. So a ritual is what we have to create first, and then frequency and repetition. That ritual will become the habit.
Mm.
Very important. And it's interesting, like what you said. Wait a second, he's playing guitar. He's got other things to do. This recovery, whether it's stillness or active recovery, research shows that when you do take intermittent recoveries throughout the day, when you do get back into your work, you're faster, you're more efficient, you're more productive.
Yeah.
So in the world
100%.
of, we're just more focused.
Yeah.
We're more motivated, we're more energized.
Yeah. No, I mean, we'll finish this podcast today and I have 30 minutes and I'll just go for a quick walk outside and then I've got 3 more hours of stuff. But if I don't go for that walk, I just won't be as sharp and whatever. So yeah, no, I hear you. Any other thoughts, any topics that you really want to touch on here as we're coming to the end? We've covered a lot of ground, but any other favorite topics or things that come up in your practice a lot?
Yeah, I do have one, which
Yeah.
I think will also help a competitor be a real competitor. Our thoughts, they're just our thoughts, and we don't have to believe everything we think.
Mm,
And so, something that I use often, if I get overwhelmed, if I get negative, Haley, it's just your thinking. Like it's just your thinking. It's kind of a little, word phrase that I use for myself. And then I realized that, yeah, it's not me. Now, if I repeat that thought over and over and over again, the process of myelination will
yeah.
take place, and that thought will grow and become my dominant thought that I can't get rid of until I find a new one. Um, but they're just our thoughts, and we don't have to believe them.
Hmm.
And then you want to go through the training on the productive thoughts that we want to embrace and believe and prove true. But I think
Hmm.
that's really important. I'm not a big fan of getting angry at myself. I don't want athletes or performers or anybody in this world to get angry at themselves for thinking a certain way. We're human, it's okay. Uh, and then let's work at it. And it's just your thought, and you don't have to believe it. There's something else that, if it's going to help you, there's something else we can think about.
And to add on to that, like if that thought that you keep having was a person, would you hang out with them? Probably not.
Right. That's a
Right?
great point.
Would you be friends with that person who keeps saying all this stuff to you? Probably not. So don't just let that go, And we've all been there. We've all gone through it. We've all have the doubt, the fear of people's opinions but that voice in our head is probably our most impactful coach, and we really have to realize when we just need to say, I'm not playing with you anymore.
Right. Close
Yeah.
that door. Go into another room.
Go into another room. Yeah. Tell people about your book, Personal Podium.
Yeah. So I have a newer book out, Personal Podium, and it's really my take on sport and performance psychology. So, what I believe to be the nitty gritty. I talk about goal setting, the only three goals that we need: visualization, specific tools, and techniques. And then every chapter, I'm a storyteller. So, every chapter includes a story of an athlete that I've worked with that's
Mm,
applying the concepts. So, it's really for all ages. And I'm really proud of it. It's a how-to. So it's not just talking about psychology in the abstract form. It's tools, techniques, making this stuff as tangible as it can be.
I love it. How can people get that, and what's the best way for people to connect with your work and connect with you?
Yeah, the greatest way is my website. Thank you, John. Dr. just Dr. HaleyPerlus.com. I have a free course on how to perform like you
Mhm.
practice, weekly mental toughness moments that I send out, master classes, one-on-one coaching, all at my website.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes and any social media and links to your book and everything. But Haley, it was a great conversation today. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for being on the Way of Champions.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Thank you again to Dr. Haley Perlus. You can connect with her, Dr. Haley, HaleyPerlus.com, and then at Dr. Haley Perlus on Instagram as well. And again, the book is called Personal Podium: How to Use Your Mind to Maximize Your Potential. Great conversation today. I like these ideas about right how our thoughts don't have to become things, and I love the story of that X Games motocross athlete overcoming multiple injuries, and does your purpose and your love of sport, is it greater than your fear of getting hurt again? Because if it is, then go for it, and if it's not, then you're probably doing the wrong thing in this moment. So some great topics, some great takeaways as well. Thank you to Sprocket Sports, our great podcast sponsor. Check them out, sprocketsports.com/CTG if you need a new website, registration tool, all that fun stuff. Thanks to our Patreon podcast champions and also all of our premium members at Changing the Game Project that help support this podcast as well. So if you want to get every course, podcast, blog post all organized for you, just go to changingthegameproject.com, and right there on the homepage you'll see become a premium member and support the work we do here. But for now, remember, your influence is never neutral. The more you're aware of it, the stronger it is. So go out there this week, use your influence for good. We'll see you again next week, everyone.